All right, here we go. Today we're going to talk about government and the state. Our objective for today, I will use my social studies skills to explain and analyze types of government, its purposes, its powers, its functions, and purposes, so I can complete practice activities and complete purpose of government Pictionary activity. I'll know I have it when I can answer practice and exit questions with an accuracy rate of 80% or higher. All right, first thing I want y'all to do is, after you put your notes in your folder, go ahead and label your table of contents, 822 and 823, government and the state. And it'll be pages 5 through 7. All right, let's get started on warm-up. If you're watching this, just answer to yourself and see if you get it right. U.S. citizenship is addressed in the blank amendment, 1st, 13th, 14th, or 21st. If you said 14th, you'd be correct. All the following are requirements for naturalization except a statement of loyalty or an oath of allegiance, U.S. history and government test, proof of employment, or the ability to speak and write English. If you answered C, proof of employment, you'd be correct. All right, let's go over pre-teaching our vocabulary. Democracy, a system of government based on the principle of majority decision-making. Direct democracy, also known as pure democracy, is a form of democracy in which the people decide, e.g. vote on, or form consensus on policy initiatives directly. Indirect democracy, a system of government in which the people control the government through elected political officials. The elected representatives represent the people. Force theory occurs when a person or a group of people take control of an area, such as the state, and make everyone in that area follow their rules and beliefs. Divine right theory. Rulers, such as kings and queens, have a God-given right to rule, and that rebellion against them is a sin. Evolutionary theory is the idea that the state developed out of the early primitive family in which one person was the head. Over the years, the original family became a network of families or a clan. Social contract theory. Government is based on an agreement between the people and their rulers, otherwise known as the social contract. Republic, a state in which the supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and which has an elected or nominated president rather than a monarch. So, what is government? You know, a lot of times when you say, who fixes roads or who declares war, everybody says the government. Okay, that's a nebulous answer. So what is the government? Government, by definition, is an institution through which a society makes and enforces policy. Public policies are all the goals of the government sets and the various courses of actions it pursues as it attempts to realize these goals. Basically, all the things the government decides to do. Make laws, taxes, defense, education, etc. All right. Government exercises 3 kinds of power. Now, we should be familiar with these by now. The legislative power, which is the power to make laws and frame public policies. The executive power, the power to enforce, execute, and administer the law. And the judicial power, the power to interpret the laws. Also, that includes applying the law, such as convicting someone of a crime. All right. Let's talk about some different types of government. A dictatorship. Think to yourself, what's an example of a dictatorship? Governments that are characterized by a dictatorship have the ultimate responsibility as being held by the power of a single person or maybe a small group of people. For example, North Korea, under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, would be a dictatorship. But we're going to break this down later. Democracy, where the majority rules. How are these two different? Well, they're almost polar opposites. In a democracy, decisions are made by the majority of people or voters. Okay? Whereas dictatorship, like North Korea or Nazi Germany or Cuba, is made by one person. And that's it. The biggest difference in democracy is supreme authority rests with the people. Another word we often hear is the term politics. Politics is a nebulous term, but it's defined as the process by which a society decides how much power and resources are distributed within that society. It's a process, while government is an institution. All right? Politics is what the government does. All right, the earliest forms of government we see in ancient Egypt. All right? Which was ruled by divine right. The pharaohs were chosen supposedly by Ra, the sun god, to have authority over Egypt. But however, we in the United States, we tend to follow the ancient governments of ancient Greece and Rome, which practiced democracy. All right, so the Greeks had a democracy and Rome had a republic. What's the difference? Greek democracy. Well, if you break the word democracy down, demos means the people in ancient Greek, and kratos means force or power. This first came about in the city-state of Athens. Now, you got to understand something about Greece. Ancient Greece was not your traditional country, okay? It didn't have a head government. It had many city-states, and this was primarily due to Greece's terrain, all right? And each individual city almost acted like a small country, all right? They had what's called direct democracy. All citizens, well, now, you got to understand, only men, educated rich men, were citizens in Greece. So they all would come together in the city and vote. So imagine if this is Bedford, and Bedford's a direct democracy. All the rich, educated, land-owning men would come together, and they would decide what's best for Bedford. All right? Now, Athens had the first democratic constitution. It was a set of rules for how the government should be run. All men over 20 years old could and would participate in the assembly, the lawmaking process. All right, each year 500 names of citizens would be drawn to the Council of 500 who ran the daily business. So basically every man who met the citizenship requirements had to participate in government. Now, would this work in America? No, we're too big. So we have to do something different. We tend to follow more of the Roman Republic model. The Roman Republic had a three-branch government. The consuls, who were the monarchical branch of the Roman Republic, the executives. The Senate, who was the aristocratic branch, they were the lawmakers. And the assembly was the democratic branch, and the Senate and the assembly made the laws, and the councils enforced them. All right? It was governed by a complex constitution. It was headed by consuls that were elected by citizens. The citizens voted for them to represent them. And it lasted for about 450 years. Which, if you think about it, our country is only less than 250 years old. Our republic is about half as old as the Roman Republic was. All right, this word state. It has many definitions. When you hear state, you automatically think of like the state of Virginia or the state of California. That's kind of not what we're talking about here. When you talk about government as a whole and the foundations of government, the idea of the state is defined as a body of people living in a defined territory, organized politically with the government, with the power to make and enforce laws without the consent of a higher authority. So a state could be a country. A state could be a state. The idea of an independent city that, like in Athens, that didn't report to a higher government is a state. All right? The term nation is an ethnic term, okay? Referring to races or other large groups of people. When you talk about the nation of America, you're talking about us as Americans. When you're talking about the state, you're referring to the individual governmental bodies. The term country is a geographic term. State has four distinct characteristics. So basically, if we're referring to a country, we can use three different terms. We can use nation, country, state. Nation is the ethnic term, referring to the people. Country is the geographic term, referring to location. And the state is the political definition. So, the four characteristics of a state: it has to have a population, territory, sovereignty. Oh wait, what's that word? Sovereignty. Sovereignty is defined as the right to rule. All right? In other words, there's a body that has power to rule within the territory, and a government. The government is the sovereign system that has the ability to rule. So where did this idea of a state come from? Well, there are 4 theories as to where states get their power. All right, the 4 theories are the force theory, which was the state born out of force. Basically, somebody walked in and took over and said, I'm in charge. The evolutionary theory, that it developed out of an early family, and the state came out of tribes and clans. Or the divine right theory. You hear the word divine, we think about religion. And that's exactly what it meant. If you rule under divine right, you have that right from God. And the social contract theory, that the people freely submitted themselves to a government. All right, so once again, the force theory is that the idea that one person or small group claimed control by force. Once the rule is established, all 4 characteristics of the state were present. Can you name them? Evolution. Who's the head of your household? Your mom, your dad, your siblings, your guardians? In other words, who's the boss? The evolutionary says that the head of the household was the government. Eventually, this lead family, one family would come out above everyone else and would lead clans and tribes on the same piece of land. This evolution theory you see a lot in Native American cultures. Some Native American cultures are matrilineal, which means they were led by women because the mother was the head of the household, or they're patrilineal, which means they're led by the father or the male. All right, very popular throughout the 15th and 18th centuries was divine right theory, that God created the state and chose individuals to rule because they were given a royal birth and a divine right to rule. Many of your monarchies, like England, came from this idea that, the king and queen's family was chosen by God because they were more important than everybody else. They were divinely chosen. And if you go against them, you're committing treason, and ultimately you'll be going to hell because it's a sin. And then the modern theory that we as Americans subscribe to is the social contract theory. All right. Early 16th century philosophers such as Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau came up with this idea that basically men are greedy, and if we're left with no government and no rules, we're going to try to take each other's property, kill each other, and it's just going to be a big hot mess. So to be safe, we're willing to give up some freedom to give a government to protect us from ourselves. So in order to change this condition, people agreed that a contract, like a constitution, would ensure our safety and well-being. Popular sovereignty, ruled by the people. Limited government, the government's not all powerful. And it protects our rights. You may remember in learning about the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson drew heavily from Locke's social contract theory when he said that if a government becomes abusive of these ends, in other words, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and lay on its foundation a new government to affect their safety and happiness. All right? So part of the contract is government agrees not to abuse us and protect us. We agree to give up some rights to be ruled by the government in exchange for that protection. However, if the government violates the contract, it is the right of the people to get rid of that government, put a new government in place. All right, so what exactly does government do? Well, in the United States, in the preamble of the Constitution, there are 6 purposes. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. Where'd that come from? Well, our first government, the Articles of Confederation, was an epic failure. In 1787, we were on the verge of economic collapse. Many rebellions were taking place against the government. People were not happy. States were not getting along. So we formed a new government under the Constitution to make it better, to form a more perfect union. Establish justice, set up a system of fair laws. This is where we get the idea of due process, and everyone's treated equally under the law. Ensure domestic tranquility. The idea of domestic tranquility is keeping the peace at home. In other words, maintaining law and order. That's why we don't go outside and people run down the street shooting each other. All right? When there's a riot, it's quickly brought back under control. Provide for the common defense. This is why we have a military, to protect us from outside attacks. Promoting the general welfare. Welfare is another one of those kind of nebulous terms. It means that the government is to affect our health, our safety, and our happiness. All right, this is where we see welfare programs, giving everybody equal opportunity. A welfare program, such as food stamps, provides food subsidies to the poor to help bring them up and put them on equal footing with people in the middle and upper class. Securing the blessings of liberty, which means our government is going to work to make sure everyone has the same freedoms today as they did when the country started. All right, now we're going to play a little game called Purpose of Government Pictionary. You're going to convene with your group, and I'm going to stop and assign them, and you're going to create a picture board for your assigned principle of government. Your board should include no words, that's the purpose of Pictionary, as many pictures as you need to help define your term, and you got to be neat. You don't have to be an amazing artist. Picasso was abstract. You can be too. Heck, stick figures work. Everyone in your group must participate. You can be creative or literal. It's up to you. As a group, you can present it to a class so we can guess which of your principles of the government is. All right, so we're going to pause there and work on the project. If you look in your notes, there is a rubric. Also, before the end of class, you need to answer these 7 questions, and have them and be prepared to turn them in. Well, that's going to wrap things up today. Get working on your purposes of government, and we'll see you tomorrow.